Welcome to Content with Character, the weekly podcast that'll give you the momentum you need to create content with more ease, clarity, and laughter. I'm your host, content copywriter Emily Aborn, and I'm all about unconventional marketing approaches. I believe in your big ideas, and I'm excited to help you share them in a way that's distinctly you. For up to 75% of the population, this one thing is more scary than spiders, snakes, bears, and even, in some cases, death. No, it's not getting your finger stuck in a finger trap, though that is terrifying. It's public speaking. And even if you're not interested in speaking on stages or in virtual Zoom rooms, this fear can actually creep in with podcast interviews or showing up on video in your content. In this episode, we're getting into all the benefits and horrors of speaking. Hi, welcome back. If you are listening to this podcast on the day that it comes out, then happy Halloween. I gotta tell you, I am reporting live, kind of tired right now. I'm good tired. I'm very good tired, but I am tired. And let me tell you why. I have been up to some busy bee work over here the past few weeks. I've been working with quite a few of my clients, wrapping up my October projects before November projects begin, which has been fun and also a whirlwind. I spoke at a conference in Massachusetts on visibility and connecting with new audiences. I attended a small group locally here in New Hampshire and shared all about content creation. I was a facilitator at a roundtable discussion for women entrepreneurs on content. I spoke in a breakout room at a conference here in New Hampshire on visibility and connecting with new audiences. And finally, in my travels, I attended a conference for women in Maine where I thankfully just got to listen and enjoy the content, shut my mouth instead of speaking, and just kind of connect with people and be there. And then to finish off the trip, I visited some of my family in Maine. It's just a few more minutes down the road because I was celebrating my little brother Peter's birthday. And then, oh my God, you thought it was over. Then we also spent the weekend celebrating my sister-in-law's birthday. So it has been an all over the place past couple of months. And I actually think it's kind of, I've shared with you before, it sort of felt like that for me a lot this year. I'm going to get into that actually in future episodes because I do want to talk about, as we've talked about taking inventory in our businesses and in our lives, I also want to talk about, sticking with the things that stick. So not spending all of our time throwing spaghetti at the wall or feeling like we're here, there, and everywhere. I know that I could really use to revisit that kind of conversation, that sort of MO, and I want to help you do the same. So we're going to get into that as we talk about future planning in December. But today, obviously, we're going to focus on the topic du jour, which is a frightening one for some people, and it is the topic of speaking. Now, what am I talking about when I'm talking about speaking? I'm talking about workshops and breakout sessions. I'm talking about presentations and keynotes. I'm talking about podcast hosting, also podcast guesting, facilitating discussions, participating in roundtables, panel discussions, maybe even a small group program and presenting or sharing in front of a small group, doing video content. And I bet actually you can probably think of more. I bet you can think of others. I've had sort of my opportunity to set a personal record this year of workshops, speaking, podcast guesting, and I have lived to tell about it. I've learned a lot about what I like and what I don't like, what works for me, what doesn't work for me, and what really does actually kind of engage people. It's been a little bit of trial by fire in some instances. Sometimes you learn the hard way, right? But I'm really proud of myself for taking all the steps that I did and trying a couple of new things, even if some haven't worked out the way that I thought they would. And also I've found ones that really, truly light me up, and I can't wait to do them again in the coming year. So I decided for this episode, I was going to bring you some fresh from the field hot off the press kind of reporting. So for those of you looking to get more visible through speaking engagements and podcast guesting and any other sort of opportunity where you need to share in front of more than one person, especially if you are feeling any sort of like nervousness or anxiety around it. And I have a feeling this is not going to be the last you hear on this topic. It's something really fun to learn about and also to talk about. So if this is a goal for you in the coming year, speaking is definitely something you want to start thinking about now. What that looks like for you, how you're going to find the opportunities, and maybe now is the time to start looking at some of the things about it that make you nervous or anxious and see if you can find some solutions that might work for you. So that's where we're headed today. But as always, first, we have to do the quickest of quick housekeeping. I want to give a huge shout out today to Robin A., who I recently met in person at a networking event held by Leslie Sturgeon, and also Bonnie, who I reconnected with there as well. Both of these ladies sat at my table and were so kind about the Content with Character podcast. They shared with the entire table of women that we were sitting at about the podcast, I'm sorry. And they were just so wonderful and kind with their feedback. And so I just wanted to give them a big thank you. And I also wanted to thank, on a personal level, my friend Debbie. Debbie and I had the chance to get together a couple of weeks ago when we were walking, and she told me that, so Debbie's not an entrepreneur, and she still listens to the Content with Character podcast, and she said she loves it. And she also gave me some just super nice, positive feedback. It had me flying high all week long. So thank you to Robin, Bonnie, and Debbie for your incredibly kind words. I appreciate you all so much. Helping me share about the podcast and also telling me what you love about the podcast really just helps me to bring the best content that I can to you. And next month in November, we're going to talk all about the topic of giving back from sort of a variety of different angles. And I'd say these three really kicked us off because it was a beautiful way that they gave back to me. So big thanks to all of you. Verbal hugs. If you are new here, hello, welcome. I'm Emily Aborn. I'm a content copywriter, podcast host of this podcast, as well as the She Built This podcast. And someone recently asked me the question of who I work with as a copywriter. And so I thought I would tell you too. The short answer is that I work with lots of people. I've worked with 97 different industries on content and copy. I do tend to work with a lot of interior designers and folks in the home trades, as well as coaches, consultants, and strategists. So I'd say those are sort of my two niches or niches, however you like to pronounce that word. But basically, I just love working with people who have a vision for their clients and they help to creatively bring that vision to life because that's kind of exactly what I do for their website and their copy. And it's just a really nice alignment. So if you want to learn more about me, you can visit emilyaborn.com. Has probably more information you'd ever want to know. But enough about me today. As I always say, onward we go. Without further ado. Oh, wait. Actually, sorry, I lied. We are going back to me, but today is story time, and it's story time for the purpose of an example to show you sort of how it started and how it's going. So for this story time, we need to rewind to my childhood. I know, we're going way back. When I was a kid, I was a church kid. So I was up in front of a lot of people quite often, doing plays, singing in the praise group, doing choreography and flag twirling and stuff. Also, I was the pastor's kid, the actual pastor's kid. So eyes were, for better or worse, on me a lot. I was also in a lot of positions where I was leading groups of younger kids, from working at a daycare to leading camps and VBS and all that kind of stuff. And I can honestly say that the thought of being nervous never once crossed my mind. I genuinely never once felt scared or nervous. There was one solo, when I was singing next to this girl, Leah. we had to sing One Small Child, and we each got a verse of it to sing as a solo. And Leah was a really, really good singer. She had a really, really good voice. And I remember having an absolute meltdown during that solo because my voice, let's just say, was not nearly as good as Leah's. But other than that, I cannot remember any other time that speaking or singing or talking in front of people ever really bothered me or made me nervous. At church, I'm not like saying this to toot my own horn. I'm saying this was like a sort of unreasonable amount of confidence that I had because there was really no fear of rejection. I was like kind of like the superstar at church. But I'll say this, around my peers, being with people my own age, that always really, really scared me. It was terrifying. I didn't actually go to proper school until I was in high school. So I didn't spend a lot of time with kids my actual age. I often spent time with kids that were way, way older than me or way, way younger than me because I was their babysitter, or quite frankly, most of the company I enjoyed was just adults. I liked hanging out with adults. So when I got to high school, my freshman year, I was, of course, around all of my peers, right? All of the people in my age group. And I was very timid and shy, and I did not speak for like pretty much a solid year. And I also got bullied and made fun of for various things, which made me want to speak even less. Now, it did get a little bit better from there, but in front of my peers, I was definitely still very scared of messing up, scared of saying the wrong thing. I remember I would like want to come into my class and like share stories of what would happen, and people would like make fun of me. So it just kind of like solidified like, nope, you aren't worth listening to from people your own age. I also remember when I tried out for parts in plays. I mean, I even went to drama. My grandparents like enlisted me in like drama camp, and I was so scared. I would just get these terrible roles because during the audition, you know, when you actually have to like read off a script or practice lines or whatever, I could barely do the practice. So I would get terrible, terrible roles because I could barely squeak out a sentence. They were like, yes, Emily, she'll make the perfect choice for this one line part we have in the play. Like I got those all the time. I do remember, however, my shining moment in high school. So my high school had a senior project where you had to kind of like spend all year researching. And then at the end of the year, you presented your research. You wrote a big, big paper, like I think it was like a 30-page paper. And then at the end of the year, you present all your research in front of like a large group of people. And my research project was on grief and loss and how it affects families. And I really I really enjoyed the process of researching, and I did a lot of interviews for it. And then I really enjoyed putting it all together and offering it as a presentation. I do remember practicing it over and over and over and over and over again because I was determined to get a good grade on that presentation that I just spent my entire year focusing on. I also remember my graduation speech, and I really, really loved it. I felt very alive and very creative after I had the opportunity to present it. But other than that, in high school, really just like put me in a group project and I'm good. But speaking up on my own, no thank you. So moving on to college, it was in a health education class my junior year that I had to stand up. This was like the moment that broke me. I had to stand up to give a presentation. Basically, we had to read a journal article and then present like our takeaway from the journal article and then like how we would approach this as a health issue. So like how would I address this health issue that the journal article brings up? So I had to stand up to give my presentation and my brain blanked. My skin went like beet red, like from my neck to my face was just like red, red, red. I was hot as the dickens and sweating bullets head to toe. And I opened my mouth to try to like give this presentation and keep going. And nothing came out. Like my mouth was like dry. I'm like, water. Absolutely nothing came out. It was so bad. I actually ended up having to like sit down and not do it, which I think made it even more embarrassing. even worse. Like now I'm just like sitting there like hot and anxious in my seat with like all that nervous energy just spiraling all around me. I came back later. My professor was so kind. He let me come back later to give the presentation and make up for the grade in front of just him. So that was great. Thank you to Mr. Holt. I was studying health education at the time. So like my whole major was studying for the purpose of teaching other people, like giving presentations, standing up in front of groups and teaching other people. So I can just tell you that this moment, it was not promising. It was not a good sign. This is what I intended to build my entire career on and get that, $38,000 that they promised you right upon graduation. Anyway, I somehow managed to survive college, and I pretty much hid in general for my junior and senior year. And then I entered the working world. And I feel like that's when I started to gain a little bit more of a sense of myself, probably once again, because I wasn't completely surrounded by people my own age. So for my first job out of college, I started working for a chiropractor who I'd been actually wanting to work for since I was 16 years old. And you're like, how did you know who you wanted to work for when you were 16 years old? Well, let me tell you. This chiropractor, Dr. Jenny, she came to my high school and presented on health and wellness when I was 16. And I was so inspired. I walked up to her afterwards and I said, when I grow up, I want to do this exact thing. I want to do what you're doing. So I went back to her when I was graduated, and in my role for her, I had the opportunity to do like health screenings at gyms, pharmacies, health fairs, and places like that. So basically I would try to get people to come up to me, step on my little scales, see how straight their backs were, and get them to come in and make a consultation in our office. If I did well in this role, I was promised a position at the front desk when a spot opened up. And from there, Jenny wanted to start talking to me about being a part of the health education that they offered in their office. So I was going to get that opportunity to give those health education presentations for their client education nights. And it was a very exciting prospect. But it was also very scary given my little track record there. And I knew that I needed to get a grip on my public speaking skills and start overcoming my fears ASAP. So I heard about Toastmasters and I told Dr. Jenny that I was going to sign up for Toastmasters and start attending. And she said, you know what? I'll sign us both up and we'll start going right away. It was probably one of the best things that happened to me in my early 20s, both as a writer, honestly, and as a speaker. And why do I say as a writer was Toastmasters helpful? Well, here's why. I wrote every single speech word for word. And then do you want to know what I did? I read them word for word. When I first started at Toastmasters, almost every week, the positive feedback was the exact same. Great speech, beautiful message, so funny, full of character, well organized. But the critiques every single week were also the same. You need to put down the script. You need to put down the script and move away from the podium. You need to put down the script. Now, you see, I, of course, was terrified of putting down that script. First of all, it was like my little safety blanket. But secondly, it was really important to me to get every single word exactly as I'd written, exactly as I'd envisioned it. And I really wanted to make sure I nailed every single point solidly from start to finish, get every single joke exactly as I'd crafted it. And I leaned on that for a long time, but it was finally in getting up in front of that office at Dr. Jenny's and learning to present real time in front of those small groups that I realized a presentation is not about getting every single word exactly how you planned it. It's a lot more than just reading off a paper. It's actually a conversation. It's about engaging, interacting, storytelling, conversing, and bringing the people in the room into the conversation with you. It's about seeing them and also letting them see you. And sometimes, honestly, you mess up. And when I mess up, I now laugh about it. Sometimes, like in the middle of my presentation or talk, if I make a mistake, I laugh about it. I call attention to it. Like on last Friday, I realized I was like kind of using my hands wildly. And in doing so, I dropped some of my notes. And so I just made fun of the fact that I used my hand wildly and I dropped my notes. Or maybe you call attention to the fact that you missed a slide or that you accidentally put a picture up on the computer screen that was not meant for others to see. Like these are the things that actually make a presentation, I think, better because it makes us human. And I'm not saying like make a whole bunch of mistakes in your presentation, but I have read so many things and heard time and time again in speaking organizations I've been part of, as well as podcasts, about how these little foibles in our communication, even something as tiny as taking a sip of water when you're talking, can actually help to connect you more to the audience, because this is what makes us human. This is also what makes speaking kind of a different form of content creation. And I think it lends itself to be a really, really powerful tool for visibility, for connection, and for creating a depth of these relationships with people that we might be sharing with. So that's my own speaking journey. And I use it only to share as an example of kind of where I started. And then if you want to kind of like fast forward to where I am today, I shared that I'd done all of those speaking engagements in just the past 2 months. And I can tell you that in most cases, getting in my car to actually get to the speaking engagement is far scarier to me than the actual speaking engagement itself. I cannot say this in all cases. I do still get nervous. But in most cases, it is more exciting to me and less frightening to me to actually stand up and talk in front of people than it is to, think about what I'm going to wear that day. All right. So I really wanted to share this story so that I could use it as a way to relate to you, because I want to inspire you. First of all, if you're in any way nervous, wherever you are kind of in that spectrum, I want to encourage you that you can overcome it, and it can actually be a genuinely energizing, fun thing for you to speak in front of groups and share with organizations. But first, before we get into some of the kind of like ways to practice and build your confidence and overcome maybe some of the anxieties that you're facing, I do want to talk about how speaking really can be beneficial for us as business owners, especially if we're trying to increase our visibility, develop our thought leadership, and find our voice. So we're going to get into that, and then I'll give you a few ideas on how to actually find speaking engagements, things that I've discovered over the past couple of years that I've really liked, and then a couple to wrap us up. I'll give you those tips that most of them are not my own, but tips to just kind of help with some of the anxiety and nervousness of getting started. So first off, why do it? Why speaking? I like it for a number of reasons, and some I came up with for the purpose of this episode were, number one, I mentioned this before, but I really love that personal connection. I love that people can see you, they can hear your voice, they can read your body language, and in many cases, it's a really, really interactive format for delivering content. I also love when I'm in a room with people that have shared maybe who they are and what they do beforehand. I can bring in examples from the audience whenever possible, and that really also helps to, again, create that personal connection, but it also helps to engage people in the content. Like people are actually listening. Oh my God, what if she uses my business as an example? What if she uses my name? So I really enjoy that. You can get this opportunity to be a little more cozy, I guess, if you will, and be really specific in what you're sharing. Storytelling, it is a great tool for storytelling, which can admittedly be a little bit harder in some of this short form content, right? Like some of the social media stuff, you don't have that much time. The other piece of it is that you can bring visuals into your storytelling. You can bring body language into your storytelling. And one thing I learned from all of these past speaking engagements recently is just how refreshing storytelling is for people. Like, it's one thing to give a bunch of tips and bullet points and stuff like that, but people really love and relate to storytelling. So That's one reason I love it. It's so great for storytelling. Number 3 is visibility. It does help to increase your reach, right? So you get this opportunity to go from working just one-to-one with people to a group. So maybe you go from one-to-one to 200 podcast downloads, right? So the other piece of that visibility is that it's often collaborative when you're doing a speaking opportunity. So you get the benefit of that collaborator sharing and promoting either the podcast episode or the upcoming event. And you also get the benefit of sharing and promoting it to your people too. So you just kind of increase your reach, right? Further, faster, together, wider, fast. Yeah. Order those however you like. But that is one thing I really, really love about speaking is it does give you this opportunity to reach more people with your message. Number 4 is credibility. I love the opportunity to be able to really show your expertise, to build your credibility and authority in a certain area, and also hone in on one very specific sort of what you're known for, what your message is. And on that note, I love that speaking, whether it be podcasting or in a group or, on a stage, it does help to develop your voice and really refine and tighten and polish your message. And it also grows your confidence in what you're sharing. So you get to kind of grow your own skills in it, your own knowledge of it. I think when you teach, you learn. And you also get to learn a little bit how people learn the information best. I learned that this year. I delivered a repurposing workshop, and I tried it twice, actually. And in doing it both times, I realized that this is really something that needs to be done in a different way. So as you give your talks, you can develop your understanding of how people learn the information and how you also want to share the information. And then lastly, number 6, this is just like a bonus. I mean, since this podcast is all about content, you can take just about anything you speak about, any podcast guesting you do, any video, anything from the stage, and you can turn it into other forms of content. In fact, at a recent speaking engagement, the very questions I got asked at the end, I said to myself, these are all fantastic for me to do an entire podcast episode on in the future. So even from the questions I got more content. The conversations you have before, the conversations you have during, at those speaking engagements, you tend to generate a lot of ideas for content. And then I guess lastly, I wasn't planning on talking about this one, but I think lastly, it really does help to build your confidence. It helps to build your trust in yourself, right? And just your, you take a courageous action step and you start to build that confidence. So those are just some things I love about speaking, no matter how you choose to do it. But I do want to talk about how to find these ever-elusive speaking engagements. Like, how do you find where to share your message? And I don't want you to be like listening to this thinking you have to take notes or memorize this list. So I included some primo extensive show notes where you're going to get links to all of the things I mentioned right now. You'll also get links to more show notes, which has a lot of this broken down for you too. So make sure you check out the show notes. If any of this sounds interesting to you, I really tried to make it comprehensive and thorough. So some of the things I found over the past couple of years, no matter what kind of speaking you're looking for, I wanted to share with you some ideas on how you can find speaking engagements that are a good fit for you. So number 1 is the Podcast Collaborative. Now, that is a free group at the very base level. So they have a Facebook group called the Podcast Guest Collaboration Group. And I did include the link for both the paid membership as well as the free Facebook group. I am not a paid member. I was at one time. But the paid membership basically gets you access to a directory full of podcasters, their email addresses, what topics they're looking for, that kind of thing. But I'm just right now a member at the free level, which is being part of that Facebook group. And I find a lot of great podcast guests in there. And I also find a lot of great podcast guesting opportunities. I'm a guest on a lot of podcasts. A lot of them come either through that group or from introductions made through that group. So oftentimes I'll be a guest on somebody's podcast and meet them. And then that will give me an introduction to another podcaster. Podcasters, we're a tight-knit bunch. We're a cozy community. And if one person says they had a great experience with you as a guest, you tend to get referred to other people that might have a similar audience, right? So I would check that group out. You can look for they have a hashtag in there called #FindAGuest, and that's kind of how you can look for what topics people are looking for. And if you have a podcast of your own, you can also look for guests in there too. So another example like that is Podmatch. I have never been a member of Podmatch, but I do know that it's very similar in that it's a directory where you get the names of the podcasters, what they might be looking for in topic, and you can connect with them directly there too. The one I love for speaking engagements, and this is right now, I just joined this year, so I don't have like a ton of experience yet. It is a paid membership. It is called Innovation Women, and it's a speaking group, basically a network of speakers where they have a beautiful directory of places that are looking for speakers. It can sometimes be hard to find, like, where do I put in my request for speaking? So this gives you that sort of list. And in most cases, it links you right to the application to apply for a speaking position. So Innovation Women is a group that I'm part of that I really, so far, I love. And they also have like networking opportunities, skill building opportunities, workshops. They have an opportunity to pitch writing and also share your podcast with them as well. So there's a lot built into it that's not just like looking for speaking opportunities that you can take advantage of at that paid level. And don't quote me on this, I think it's about $100 a year. To be a part of Innovation Women. And if it's something you're considering, I did include a link to that, of course, in the show notes. Some other ideas for you that are not like, group specific, like name of group specific, are like your local chamber of commerce. If you're a member, they will have opportunities where you can come share and present a workshop to the group. And they're always looking for people to come create like really good, impactful workshops. Another one is the Rotary, depending on what your topic is. I don't think the Rotary lets you come in and like sell your business or, share that kind of thing, but they do love inspirational speakers or humorous speakers or storytelling. And if you're just looking to kind of like work on your skills, it can be a good place to start. So I love the Rotary for that. Ours is such a great one. I think I've spoken at the Rotary 3 times, and it has just been a total blast every single time. Like, we have had so much fun. I've talked about networking. I've shared my entrepreneurial story, and I can't remember what the last one was, but it's been really, really fun. The other thing is just like organizations and groups that you know about. So for example, when I was running She Built This as a paid membership, I was always looking for monthly workshop speakers. Like, I ran a workshop every single month and I needed to fill those seats. And I was always open to like new, cool, out of the box topics. So that might be something to check out too. Just think of any of those organizations or groups that you're like, oh, well, I know they have a monthly meeting, or I know they have a monthly workshop. Like, maybe they're actually advertising it all the time on Facebook or something. The other one is co-working spaces. Your local co-working spaces are often looking for presenters and speakers. And then the other ones I thought of, some of these are going to be specific to New Hampshire and New England, but SCORE, I think that is universal. The SBDC, we have that in New Hampshire, and I'm fairly sure they have one in Massachusetts as well. The Hannah Grimes Center, that's specific to like Keene, New Hampshire, and then the Center for Women and Enterprise. I know we have one in New Hampshire. I'm not sure if y'all have one, but those links for New Hampshire and Massachusetts specifically, I included in the show notes. And then the other one is like friends and connections, right? So like, who do I know that can connect me to XYZ who needs workshop speakers? Who do I know that knows podcasters who can connect me to XYZ on the following topics? So thinking kind of outside the box and like, who is already in your network? Who are you already connected to that can actually connect you to other opportunities? I'll share one that I had recently. a client of mine who I've had the opportunity to do, I think this is our third content bank, and she's also done like blogs and email sequences and things like that with me, like time and time and time again. She is part of a organization, and she's not even the leader of it, but she connected me to the leader to come in and speak for that organization. So she is in my network, right? And she gave me that opportunity. And then here's another one. Here's another fun idea. Like, hey, why don't you just host and put on your own workshop, put on your own business day, put on your own retreat, start your own podcast, right? So that is another way. If you can't find the speaking engagements, create the speaking engagements, okay? All right, and this I just want to dance into very ever so briefly. I did a whole podcast episode on this, so I'll make sure that there's a link to that in the show notes. But when it comes to pitching your topics, I would really encourage you to sit down and, or if you're even thinking about like, what would I talk about? What am I going to talk about? I would sit down. Now is a great time to do it as we kind of near the end of the year here, and think of really like 3 to 5 topics that are in your lane, that are part of your expertise. I also think that personally, I believe that part of what gives us confidence is staying in our lane, speaking to what we know about and what we work on in our own businesses, and not trying to copycat other people. So I really say, like, sit down and think about like, what 3 to 5 topics are mine? What could I talk about ad nauseum pretty much any day, all day? And really create those topics to be something a little bit unique, right? So you don't want something super vague like money mindset, or I probably wouldn't just say marketing. I would really hone in on something specific that I want to share. And you can come up with more than 5, okay? You can come up with as many as you want. But when you are pitching to certain people, keep in mind like what their perspective is. So keep in mind who you're pitching to, and you can choose from your topics. But be as specific as you can. I love creating titles that are a little bit unique and like a little bit catchy. And I'm not the best at that. That's a work in progress. And I would also encourage you, in considering your topics, what topics do you have some storytelling around? So what topics are you able to bring in that element of storytelling? So that's sort of like my tip on creating a topic, creating what you're actually going to speak about. Like I said, I did a whole episode on this specific to podcast pitching and pitching to be a speaker. So I'll include that link in the show notes. But I now would love to just get into these tips and recommendations for getting unscared. Now, a lot of these tips came from the Innovation Women's Facebook group. There's a lot of seasoned speakers in there. And so I asked the question what they would give as a recommendation for somebody just getting started, or maybe somebody who isn't just getting started, but still feels nervous each and every time that they go to speak. So I wanted to share those with you, and then we'll wrap up. Tip number 1 is something from me in my own personal story. I just found it really, really beneficial to be part of a speaking organization. It really helped to grow my confidence. It helped me to practice. It helped me to understand, like through that feedback, what I was doing well and what I was not doing well. The other group that I was a part of was Speaker Sisterhood. So there was Toastmasters at first, and then Speaker Sisterhood down the road. And I don't think that Speaker Sisterhood is running groups anymore, but something like that just gives you an opportunity to practice. And if you can't find a group, there's the option of course, always like kind of creating a little group of maybe 3 of your trusted friends. Or I also love, if you're feeling really nervous, practicing it in front of one person. Let's say like your spouse or your best friend or your mom. So practicing in front of them first and foremost, and asking them the very first time you run through it. All I want this first time is super positive feedback. All I want is positive feedback. So you run through the first time, and all you get the first time is positive feedback. And then maybe you come back and you lean into those positive spots, but then maybe the second time around, they kind of give you a little bit of critical feedback. Like, here's the things you want to work on. That's one of the things we do. I know I haven't talked about it in a while, but that is one of the things I've added into my Marketing Momentum Lab, is this opportunity for people to practice in front of a group. And I really think that a lot of overcoming our fear in speaking comes down to practice. Some of those practices go smoother than others, but I think practice is a huge, huge piece of it. So finding a place where that becomes like the norm for you is super beneficial. This tip comes from Sarah Tetlow. She's the owner of Firm Focus Legal Productivity Coaching. And she says, take a step that makes you uncomfortable but leads you in the right direction. Now, when Sarah shared that, she shared that her first dabble into something uncomfortable, which was not actually even speaking at first, was karaoke. And then Bobby Carlton's the founder of Innovation Women. Hers is along this vein too. And she says she started with an improv class. So just taking a step that makes you uncomfortable, but leads you in the right direction. So maybe it's not even speaking at first, but it's something that gets you up in front of people, right? Like for me, when I was a kid, it was those singing and doing the flags and performing in front of the church and stuff. This one comes from another member in Innovation Women, and her name is Christina Hackett. And she says to embrace mistakes. Understand that it's okay to make mistakes. Even experienced speakers make them. Instead of dwelling on errors, learn from them and move on. Like I said at the beginning, I often make fun of myself if I'm making a mistake during a speech, or I just at least kind of call attention to it, which maybe I need to work on that in and of itself. But on my way home recently from one of my speaking engagements, I was thinking about not mistakes that I'd made, but just things that I want to learn from in moving forward. Some of these, like how Christina says, don't dwell on errors, learn from them and move forward. So I do encourage you to do that, to really reflect on what went well and what didn't well and learn from those things. I also, and this is why I was so grateful to have that opportunity to go to the Maine Women's Conference and not be a speaker. It is really awesome and empowering and insightful to watch other speakers, to learn from other people, watch and learn from experienced speakers, pay attention to what they do that you love, pay attention to what they do that you don't love, to their techniques and strategies. Learn from other people. And then this one is something I actually recommended to my husband. Not that he wants to get up and stand in front of a bunch of people, but he has something up his sleeve. And that is to practice by recording yourself. And you can do this too with whether it comes to presentations or whether it comes to getting used to the sound of your own voice. Just recording yourself and then listening back and reviewing. It can help you identify what things that you do well, what things you don't want to do well, or that you don't do well, where in your speaking you kind of want to clean up and polish. Two more for you. Linda Ugolo she was a guest on the She Built This podcast. She wrote a book called The Light in the Limelight, and she really helps people to overcome the fear of public speaking in a deep and powerful and meaningful way. I did include Linda Ugolo's TikTok in the show notes because she gives tips on her TikTok. I'm not on TikTok, but I think that you'll like it if you are. So make sure to check that out. And then I want to leave you with this one. This is from Lori Richardson. Lori Richardson said, personal discomfort getting up and speaking can often be overshadowed by the great ideas, insights, and examples that you share for others. So in other words, it's actually not about you. If you have ideas to share that are going to help others, that is your gift. And for it to go to waste could be tragic. And I just want to echo that and say that you, my friend, listening, you have a gift and you came here to share that gift. If you are feeling nervous, my friend Stacy used to say, you don't have to feel nervous when you're in service, but if you're feeling nervous, I often like to think of it like this. I like to think of somebody who came before me, who inspires me today. Somebody who, if they hadn't shown up and given their gift, if they had played small, if they hadn't shared their knowledge, if they hadn't given their expertise, their words of encouragement or inspiration, I maybe wouldn't be where I am in my life today. And you know what? That chiropractor that I shared with you at the beginning, if she had been too scared to get up in front of a group of ornery, disrespectful high schoolers, distracted high schoolers, and she said, you know what? Nope, I am too scared to share in a high school. I don't know if my life, I genuinely don't know if my life would have taken the same path that I did. I don't know if I would have studied what I did in school. I don't know if I would be where I am today. So Let me ask you that question. Like, what if your favorite podcaster never opened their mouth? What if your favorite author never wrote that book? What if your favorite speaker never shared their voice? So keep that in mind. It is a gift to other people when you decide to be visible, when you decide to show up. And keep this in mind too. Visibility is a two-way street. So while it's a gift for you to show up for other people, while you can change their life, it is also a gift when others say yes to you, when they collaborate with you to help you show up, when they give you their platform, when you're a guest on somebody else's podcast, when you get that opportunity to present a workshop, you have to remember that they are giving you a gift too. And I think that it's important to remember this because, first of all, we definitely want to give gratitude and extend gratitude, but it also is a nudge for us to give back to them too. So one easy way to do this is just show up on time and show up prepared for what you are being asked to present on and participate in. Maybe you send a little thank you card after the opportunity that they gave you. Maybe you help to promote that podcast episode or that event, right? So you're helping to be part of that collaboration. It is not an opportunity to be taken lightly. It's not just another calendar appointment in your day. When somebody gives you access to their platforms and their people, it shows that they trust you and they want you to bring your unique value to the table. So be yourself, first and foremost, and come with a giver's mindset. Be ready to offer as much as you hope to receive. And if you're like me, maybe it's even a little bit more. All right, next week, on that same note, we're going to kick off November with some fun stuff. I'm going to be focusing on reciprocity and giving back. I'm not talking like the usual gratitude stuff. I'm sure that there's going to be some thankfulness sprinkled in, of course, but we're going to really talk about like what kind of role reciprocity has in our visibility and has in our content. And I'm going to start off with 4 benefits of creating content. So how your content gives back to you. So I hope to see you then. And like I said, this is not the last you've heard of me on speaking. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Content with Character. If you loved the episode, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast, rate, review, and share it with someone else you know it could help. For more content and visibility tips, visit my blog at emilyaborn.com and be sure to connect with me on Instagram at emilyaborn. I'd love to hear how this inspired you to take action.